Imagine the softest sheets you've ever felt. Now imagine them getting even softer over time. I'm here to tell you about Boll & Branch and how you can discover this new level of softness with their iconic sheets. In a recent customer survey, 96% responded that Boll & Branch sheets get softer with every wash. They source the rarest 100% organic cotton for an incredible softness to start. Then they skip the toxins and harsh chemicals for a natural feel unlike anything else. And it all comes together with their signature weave. This special design feels buttery, breathable, and unlocks new levels of softness with every wash. And they stand behind their promise of softness. With their 30-night guarantee, you can wash, style, and sleep in their sheets for an entire month. If during the 30 nights you don't love your sheets or feel them getting softer and softer, you can send them right back, no questions asked. So head to bollandbranch.com for 15% off your first order with code RESTFUL15. That's BOLL and branch.com. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything
Nailed
is
it.
the short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my
prior
god,
to
so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. As always, I'm Jamie, and joining me today is the one and only editor at Chicken House and author of two of her own novels, Kesia Lupo. Hey, Kesia. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
It's my absolute pleasure. I didn't really know where to start with you because you're sort of prolific in publishing now. Let's start with where storytelling began for you. So, like, when did you know you wanted to be part of writing and publishing?
Well, that's an interesting question in a way, because I feel like for many people, and for me too, you're a reader before you're anything else, and before you really understand where books come from and that there is a whole industry behind them. You know, I remember being absolutely voracious reader from a really, really young age. And also I did write from a young age too. I remember winning a poetry competition when I was 9, and the prize was the first Harry Potter book. Like, so it was kind of like one of those things where, like, it just kind of went hand in hand as long as I can remember. The first time I really became aware of, like, the publishing industry was actually probably at university. So I would have been like in my late teens. And I had a friend there called Natasha Pulley, who's now really best-selling famous author in the adult market. And she was already like super clued up about sort of everything in the whole industry. And that was kind of my first insight into it, really. Before then, I'd just been like writing for fun, pretty much.
Yeah. So you did history at university, right?
I did, yeah. So completely unrelated, and I kind of thought I was going to be an academic, actually, and you know that was what I kind of peaked academically in my A levels, and then when I got to uni, I was like, actually, I'm not that smart compared to the other people here. So I was not like absolutely acing everything as I'd used to. And I kind of just kind of realized that wasn't the kind of mind that I had. Actually, I was more interested in, you know, the stories surrounding history. And, like, you know, history is basically just like people gossiping about dead people. And, like, that was kind of what I liked about it. So, and then coming at it from that angle, it was so obvious that I wasn't supposed to be an academic. So, yeah, I had to think of something else. And this was sort of what I stumbled onto.
Okay, so what was your sort of trajectory going through publishing? Where did you first get your foot in the door?
So after uni, when I had absolutely no idea what to do, basically, I thought, well, heard about publishing industry and specifically about writing. I'd love to be a writer. I had written some sort of books, I guess, like really, really bad, like Word documents on my my laptop.
Oh yeah. We've all got those stashed away.
Oh yeah, we all have these, like, I mean, epic, you know, 100,000 word, terrible teenage fantasy type things. So somehow I managed to get onto a creative writing MA. So it was actually kind of through the MA that I started to become more aware of, like, what the publishing industry was like. And I didn't realize I was writing YA at the time. In fact, I was writing something completely, quite serious and historical and, like sort of what I thought I ought to be writing. But it was through like submitting that book and failing to get an agent and everything that I started thinking, well, I like, workshopping other people's books and I like talking about other people's work. So maybe I should look into trying to get into publishing. So I did probably about a year of just like working for free in London for various like publishers. And there was one in particular called Hearst, which is like a non-fiction political kind of publisher, very, very small. And I worked there for like 6 months. And then I worked for the Eve White Literary Agency for a couple of months. And I did like a little internship at Penguin. And like, so it was kind of like a year of just putting myself out there. And off the back of that, I got my first job, which was at Pan Macmillan, working in the, basically working for like Tor and Picador as like in what we call editorial management, which is so complicated, but like they separate out editorial into like the people who commission and buy the books and work on them in those early stages, and then what they call editorial management or editorial services, which are like they hand them over, so you manage like the copy edits and the proofreads, which are basically smoothing out the manuscript ready for printing. So that's where I started as an assistant in that kind of division. Right. So very different from what I do now. And I kind of, after it was sort of like just a geographical thing, to be honest. I was looking for publishing jobs back where I'm from, which is the southwest of England. Happened to stumble across a job for a junior editor position at a children's publisher called Chicken House, which, to be honest, I'd never heard of. And then I just thought, well, might as well try. And, amazingly, I still can't believe it, got the job. And here I am 7 years later almost. So it's been a very different kind of world from where I started. But that's the general trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit, a lot of hard work at the start and then sort of just grinding and then sort of almost accidentally, but kind of on purpose, ending up somewhere where you seem to be really thriving and enjoying it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's a great job. And like the beginning, it was hard, but, I had the luck and privilege really to have an aunt who lived in Middlesex, which is commutable just about into central London. So I was living rent free and I was able to like, do it basically, which a lot of people don't have. So it's something I've become peripherally aware of. Like the more I've worked through publishing, it's just how difficult it is to actually get those opportunities that I had. But it was hard graft, not much money. Living in London, once I got the job, was just like, oh my God, absolutely insane. I don't know how anyone is expected to live on, 18,000 a year in central London.
Yeah, in London, it's crazy. Oh my gosh. So through that time, were you always writing? Yeah,
so actually I kind of stopped after I did the first book and failed to get an agent. So like I said, it was this adult historical, adventure drama kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it was just, it obviously just wasn't quite right for the market. I did get a near miss with an agent who basically was like, I'll take you on if you sort of rethink it in this whole way and do a kind of like, it was kind of like a series idea. And I just, I couldn't do it. I was just like, no, it's not for me. I don't think this is the right thing. Yeah. And then after that, I just thought I'll focus on my publishing career and just set it aside. And then while I was at Pan Macmillan, there was a group of us there who were doing NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And I started writing again for that, basically. And I've never, never ever completed NaNoWriMo. Like I probably get halfway, but that's still like a lot of words. But that was kind of the very, very first draft of the book that eventually did get the publishing contract.
Was that We Are Blood and Thunder?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
It was a long journey after that, so that would have been in 2013, and it didn't get picked up until 2017 or published until 2019. So yeah, so it's quite a long process for that book. But yeah, I was writing it and working on it and rewriting it all through that time.
And going through the traditional submission process, I presume, as well.
Yeah, more or less. But when I did actually get an agent, it was a little bit through the contacts I had at the publisher. So I shared it with one of my sort of fellow interested in writing type people there, and she happened to be an assistant editor who knew Veronique Baxter, who's my agent now, and said this might be her kind of thing. But the funny thing was, I submitted it to the agency sort of general submissions pile.
Yeah.
And which is what I had to do, and I had to put like for the attention of Veronique. And really weirdly, so the next day I got a rejection from the general inbox, and I thought, oh gosh, that's really depressing. Like, she didn't even look at it; she just rejected it. And then the next day I got an email from her saying, this is really interesting. Like, can we talk? So that just goes to show that, like, you know, obviously there was an assistant or someone managing that inbox, and then Veronique separately looking at it, and those two people had completely different reactions. Like, the rejection was like, it's so generic, like, we get so much of this type of thing, sorry, it's just not for us. And then Veronique was like, this is really different, it's really interesting. And it just goes to show, doesn't it?
It just reminds you how subjective the whole thing is.
Absolutely.
So that was We Are Blood and Thunder. That's your first book that you got the agent with, and the publishing deal as well.
That's right.
Was that a 2-book deal, and subsequently your second book, We Are Bound by Stars, did that come out as a 2-book deal? It
did, yeah. So that was straight off the bat, which is really valuable and nice to have as a first-time author, because you know that you've got a second chance sort of in the bag.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not I love fantasy, and this is something that a few fantasy authors that I've read have done. They're not sequential, but they are set in the same world. Do you prefer writing standalone sort of open and closed stories?
I think it came naturally to me that way. I'm not sure if it's because it's not a preference for my reading tastes. I read loads of really big fantasy series and love them.
Yes, me too.
I love all of that. I think it's, to be honest, it's like something to do with writing this particular story, where I just felt like I had a very clear arc for the characters and the world, and like actually, I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers, but it would have been difficult to carry on with the same characters basically after that. So kind of naturally, the next book just had to be, it's a new set of characters, a new location. You could absolutely read it as a standalone. So it's, I think it was kind of like having two linked stories that like enrich each other, but are both standalone stories, which I actually find quite, as a reader, I probably would quite find that refreshing. Like there's a lot of series, which I love, but also sometimes it's good to be like, I want to stay in the same world, but I also want something that tells me about different characters, a different part of that world. And
and also as an author, I imagine you build this fantasy world with so much sort of possibility and so many elements. It's almost sort of a shame just to do one book and be like, okay, that world's done.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think you put all this work into building a universe that is, that works, and then to just do one book is, that would be, I think that's probably why you see so many fantasy series, because, you almost put in so much work so that you've got to kind of explore it, haven't you?
Yeah, I love the way, have you read Joe Abercrombie's stuff?
I've read Half a King and absolutely loved it. But I don't think I've read any of his other books.
So he has the First Law trilogy, and then he does a thing that's actually kind of, so he has that trilogy, which is 3 books, which is a story, and then the next book is set sort of 10 years afterwards, and it involves like a couple of characters who were side characters, but mostly new characters. And then there's another one which is like 10 years on, and it's the same thing. And there's these 3 sort of spaced out books in the same world, where some characters come back and pop up. And then there's another trilogy, which is like way, way, way later after the first trilogy. So it's the same world, but with like technology as advanced and things like that. And I just think that's such a cool way to like stay in world.
Yeah, and I mean, other ones, examples like Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy, and then the other 2 after that, like really, really interesting use of time and character and all of that. And Brandon Sanderson also does a really amazing job. I know he's a bit, controversial at the moment, but I love his books. He's amazing.
Hey, I'm never gonna think badly about him for releasing more books.
No, I'm the same.
I'm not gonna get angry. How dare you release this many books?
I am on that crowdfunder right now.
That is insane, though. I'm gonna bring us back on to talking about you, because I feel like we could probably talk about fantasy authors for the next 2 hours.
I think we could.
Was it strange? Being an editor at Chicken House is sort of very core to the publishing process. Was it strange for you to then sort of go outside of that with your own writing and sort of loop back around and come back in at a different angle?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very strange, and it never stops being strange, because I become like the biggest hypocrite in the world. Like I'm like sitting there like, oh my god, my editor, who's amazing, is taking so long to get back to me. I'm really impatient. Like, how can it take this long to read it? And then I'm looking at my own inbox and realizing I've kept people waiting literally 4 to 6 months for comments on their manuscript. It's just, you just realize it's more complicated than it looks. And I think also just being edited has been really eye-opening in terms of how, I mean, I know you...
When you visit Arizona, time is measured in moments, not minutes. Like the moment your work stress disappears as you kayak through the canyons. Or the moment you discover the life-changing effects of prickly pear chocolate. But nothing beats the moment you see the Grand Canyon for the very first time. Visit a new state of mind. Learn more at hereyouareaz.com.
Spoken to other editors before, and it's true that you realise you have to be more, as sensitive as you can be. But also what I really have valued is just straight talk, and like people just being like, you know what, this isn't working, and I think we need to do this. And I think there can be too much sensitivity sometimes. But it depends on the author. You want to sort of tread carefully for some, perhaps, especially if they're new. But if you've got a really good working relationship with an author, which me and my editor have with each other now as we're working on book 3, it's fine for you to just be like, yeah, I don't think this bit of the plot is working. Like, you need to rethink that. And also allow the author to do their work, and like give them the space to do their work, and don't be too prescriptive. Because I think my instinct before as an editor was like to be very give lots of suggestions and be like, oh, you could do this or you could do that. But sometimes it's better to just raise the question and let the author come up with the answers that fit with their kind of imagination. So yeah, I've learned so much from both sides of it, really. It really has like enriched my whole experience of both being an author and an editor.
Yeah, I mean, since we've already brought him up, and Naomi will tell me off because she's always like, stop bringing up Brandon Sanderson for everything. But Brandon Sanderson does a great series of lectures on YouTube, and one of them is about it's about being in a critique group and how to give effective critique. And I always remember, I think it's so valuable, and I always try and apply it to when I'm working with my friends who are writers and things like that, where he says, try not to make too many suggestions unless they're specifically asking for it. Try to just raise questions, as you said, because as soon as you start saying this could be done another way, or like what you're really saying is I would have done it this way, and you're not writing that story.
That's exactly it. And I think, editors, I think people think of us sometimes as like all-knowing, kind of powerful, like we have the power to do whatever we want with your book, and like we're gonna like shut the gates to you or open them, like it's not really like that. We're all just learning all the time about how to do this very kind of specific, personal, like odd job in a way. And like I've learned, I don't know, I've learned obviously from my superiors in the company, so like Barry and Rachel, who are the editors that are above me, and who, when I started, sort of acquired all the books and I would sort of work on them. But I've also learned a lot just from authors, because I think, you can have the wrong instinct sometimes. And I have led people in the wrong direction, and we have had to backtrack. And I think just learning that, like, you are just as fallible as they are, and you're just giving your honest opinion almost as a reader sometimes. And that can be wrong, and that can lead you astray. And it doesn't often happen anymore. I think that I've got better and better as I've gone on, luckily. But it is a learning process, and we're not infallible, and we're not all powerful, and it is very much teamwork. That's what I found from the other side. It's like having someone on your team who cares about you and your writing, which is amazing.
Because it's you as an editor and the authors that you're working with, that's teamwork. You're not against them, which I get some people I think perceive it that way. You're not there saying, no, you have to cut these bits, this bit has to be this bit has to, it's how can we work together to make this thing better as a whole.
And sometimes that may be, I would strongly advise cutting this bit, but I'll always try and make it more of a conversation than a negotiation.
I imagine a lot of the time, if you make a suggestion of a change, or if you say this bit needs work, and then you make it, as you say, a conversation, the two of you together will come up with something that's better than what was originally there, and sort of fixes the problem and things like that.
And often better than whatever idea I've come up with. There's a lot of authors I work with like suggestions, but they'll go away and sort of, Naomi's one of these authors. I will give her suggestions, but she'll basically just go away and make it like 5,000 times better. And that is the dream, where they're open to your creativity and creative input, but it's like ultimately their book, and they'll take ownership of anything that they take on. That's a dream author.
Yeah. So you touched on Barry and Rachel. You said presumably they still do acquire a lot of the books that come through, but are you also involved now in that acquisition process?
Yes, I am. Since 2019, when I became senior editor officially. A little bit before that, I was technically acquiring books, but it's kind of who writes the emails to the agents, who negotiates the contracts, and I do that now. So Barry is the managing editor, and for those that don't know, he was the editor who acquired Harry Potter back at Bloomsbury in the 90s, and this was his company that he set up in 2000. And Rachel Leishan is the editorial director. So she actually, basically, me and Rachel now do the same job. I still have a bit more residual admin, but basically we do the same job of acquiring and editing books. But Barry's more of a sort of managerial, hands-off. He'll read along and give general comments and sort of help with the editorial, but he's not kind of hands-on editing at the moment. So it's a really nice structure, actually, and it means that Rachel and I kind of just divide the list between us, and we both get loads of variety of what we work on. So I'm working on everything from younger middle grade with some illustrations, quite short, funny, all the way up to like top YA, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to have that variation. Keeps things interesting.
Definitely, yeah.
And how do you approach the sort of process of going through the submissions?
That's a very good question. So we have a few different avenues. I mean, the short answer is chaotically. Okay. I've listened to like some of these podcasts, and everyone's like very like organized. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that's not me. But I guess
color coordination, tabs, different piles.
It's not happening that way. I mean, we have a few different avenues of how submissions come in. So we have agented submissions, which is, I think, standard across most publishers.
Yeah.
And those are generally very, very good quality. And we take them very, very seriously. But to be honest, they're not the main source for us. So we keep an eye on them and we jump on anything that looks really interesting. I'm responsible for kind of receiving the submissions and logging them and saving them and stuff like that. So I'll always have like a quick look at the covering letter mainly. And if something sounds interesting, I'll send it on either to Rachel, Barry, or myself to read. But yeah, a lot of weight on those rests on the covering letter.
Right.
And then the other avenues are our Times Chicken House competition, which is we run every year in conjunction with the Times. It's been going for something like 11 years now. And that is direct from authors who don't have an agent. And it's kind of seasonal work. So we have it's open right now and the deadline is June the 1st. And then we read all the submissions, or we and a team of readers basically read all the submissions. And usually there's 800 plus, sometimes, over 1,000. Wow. That's more like, because it's direct from authors, like the quality varies a lot more, but that's kind of a main source of most of our debut books, probably.
Oh, interesting.
And then the third avenue is when we run open submissions days. And what we do is we offer people the opportunity to be mentored by us. So we're not offering a publishing contract, which is the prize for the Times competition. It's more like a foot in the door type thing where we'll work with you to develop the manuscript with a view to eventually acquiring it. And that has been a good source for us as well. We've just had the two that we sort of discovered, quote unquote, in 2020 have just been published. The Secrets Act by Alison Weatherby and Jimmy at the River School by Sabine Adeyinka. And they're both fantastic. So we've got sort of, I think being a small publisher, we have to be a bit nimble with how we sort of find new submissions and new talent. Yeah. So the emphasis for us is weirdly more on direct from author submissions than you might think.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Unusual, probably.
Do many of the authors who will come through that direct to you without agents, after they've either signed with you or sort of had some sort of interaction with you, or a successful interaction with you, do they often end up getting agents, or do they just stay unagented working directly with you?
It varies. I mean, most people do choose to get an agent, and actually part of the prize for the competition is we have an agent on the panel, and then they will offer you representation.
Okay.
But you don't have to take it. You don't have to take the publishing contract either. It's just more like it's all set up for you so that you feel comfortable as an author. There's an independent agent there who can check the contract, and all of that is just kind of like, you can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And I think we do have a few who've come directly to us and stayed direct, but some of them then later in their careers decide to get an agent because they want kind of another voice, another person on their team essentially. But it's, it's pretty much with the competition, it's a standard contract. We don't change it per winner. It's been the same we had it sort of updated, but essentially the same for a few years. It's quite a generous advance of £10,000. So it's a good prize. And I think some people would rather not give away the 15% when they've sort of, in their terms, they've done the hard work of getting the contract. But it's totally a personal decision. I have an agent, so I'm all for having that person on your team and having that advice and kind of overall career guidance. I think that's what you don't get if you sign direct with the publisher and stay that way, because the publisher can only look at what they're publishing, and you might want to, publish another strand with a different house. Like you might want to write both children's and adult. If you've got an agent, they can kind of manage that whole process for you. Anyway, it's in terms of our authors, the vast majority of them do sign with agents at some point.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's good to know. I mean, but yeah, as you said, it's very personal. As with all things in publishing and storytelling, it's unique and personal to the individual.
Exactly.
And everyone finds success in their own ways. So what advice would you give to writers at the moment who are sort of finalizing their manuscripts, getting ready to submit?
Okay, yeah, good question. I think the covering letter is really important, and the synopsis is really important. And this is, I know that our sort of submissions guidelines for the competition pretty much mirror what most agents want. You know, we've got our covering letter, synopsis, and we ask for the full manuscript. You know, most people ask for the first 3 chapters, but, you know, it's the same principle. Mm-hmm. I cannot stress enough how important the covering letter is for me personally. You know, if I don't get a sense of like, this is different and special and really well thought out and really exciting from the covering letter, I kind of instantly put it to one side in my mind. So it is really crucial. Spend like real time honing that covering letter, getting the comparisons right, locating it in the market, make your job as easy as possible for the agent or editor who's reading it. Having said that, you know, it's not the be all and end all. We're not going to like hold it against you if there's a spelling mistake. It's more about the idea and like, you know, the concept and where it would sit on the bookshelves, and have you done your reading? It's not, I feel like some people get really nervous about like, oh gosh, I've missed out a full stop, or I misspelled someone's name. You know, I wouldn't hold that against anyone. It's more like, can you nail down what this book is about?
Yeah. Okay. Have you like really thought it through? Is it
exactly?
Yeah. I got it. And another advice question: what advice would you give publishing hopefuls looking to break into an editorial role?
I think just now that we're coming out of COVID, hopefully,
fingers crossed.
Yeah, probably spoke too soon, and next week it'll all be locked down again. No, please no. But now that we're coming out of it, I think, you know, just be in contact with people, show up at events if you can. You know, author panels and events are useful to be at because the publishers are there. You know, always talk to the authors, talk to the publishers. If you can go to big events like YALC, which is the YA literary convention, at Comic-Con, that's also a really, really great opportunity to meet people. If you can't do that, if you can't physically go and meet people, just put yourself out there in terms of, you know, ask questions. If someone says they're open to questions on, you know, on Twitter or social media or whatever, you know, ask them. Just don't be scared. I think just don't be scared of publishing people. We all are very passionate about books and our jobs, and we like talking to people who are also passionate about books and want to get into this type of role. So it's actually a very friendly industry, and if you can just kind of make yourself known, I think that's probably the best thing you can do. And it's still an industry that's quite reliant on kind of work experience and that kind of thing, which is not so great, but there are increasing opportunities, paid opportunities, especially at the sort of big 5 publishers in London. But, you know, there's lots of things out there now recognizing that access has been difficult for many years. So I'm hoping that people who want to get into publishing today will find that it's more open and more, you know, accessible, basically.
Yeah. You've just got to throw yourself at it, find every opportunity you can.
Yeah. And hopefully you don't have to work for free for a year like I did. But
hopefully.
You know.
Hopefully. Yeah. Well, brilliant. That's great advice, both to writers and people looking to get into publishing. And that brings us to the final question, which, as always, is, Kesia, if you were stranded on a desert island with one book, which book would you take? So
I tried to do this very quickly and on instinct, because I thought I could fall into a black hole of thinking about all of the books I would take.
That's sensible.
And I know. I was just like, no, I've got to just go with my gut on this one. So I'm thinking because it's, a desert island, it's really boring. I'll want to like escape onto another world. Of course, it had to be fantasy.
Okay.
The one kind of, I don't know if this is cheating, but I had this bind up when I was younger of the Gormenghast trilogy, which I read to death, and I haven't really picked it up since. So I think I would take that bind up, or if I couldn't take the whole trilogy, I guess I would take book one. But the Gormenghast trilogy is so like intricate and like complicated and kind of heavy duty fantasy, but in the best possible way, that I think, not having any distractions because you're just on a desert island would actually be the perfect opportunity to like dive into that world.
Yes. Is it I'm not familiar with it. Is it a hard magic system?
It's not actually, but it's like a very complicated family in a huge, like, sprawling castle, loads of characters. Like, it's kind of like a political, I don't know. Yeah, it's wow. Really cool.
Sounds
I think it may be written in the 70s or something.
Okay.
Like, it's relatively old is what I mean, like it's not like a brand new fantasy trilogy. But yeah, really classic. Like, you should definitely check it out. If you like stuff like, Game of Thrones and all of that, but maybe not so much the magic, then it might be perfect for you.
Okay.
I love magic as well, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a great choice. You've got a big cast to keep you company, lots of intrigue to keep you busy as well. Great choice. That will be added to the Desert Island Library. Thank you so much, Kesia, for coming on the show and sharing all of your experiences and your writing journey, both in the industry as well as your own sort of storytelling with me and everyone listening.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
And for everyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Kesia is doing, you can follow her on Twitter at Kes Lupo or on Instagram at Kesia Lupo Author. Both her books, We Are Blood and Thunder and We Are Bound by Stars, are available now. You can go get them. If you're wanting to submit to the Chicken House competition, which is annual, is currently open, head over to the Chicken House website and you can get all the submission guidelines and all the details there. To make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow us on Twitter at Right and Wrong UK and on Instagram at Right and Wrong Podcast. Thanks again to Kesia for coming on, and thanks to everybody listening. We'll catch you in the next one.
Now for a limited time, the new $1.99 crispy tender wraps are here at Sonic. Who could deny a crispy chicken tender with bold flavors like hickory barbecue and cheesy Baja? And we can't forget the crisp lettuce and melty cheese to make the perfect bite. Wrap yourself up with some TLC, tender, love, and chicken for only $1.99. Sonic $1.99 crispy tender wraps. Tax not included, limited time only at participating Sonic drive-ins.
Before Shopify, were you wondering, where are my sales at? Now you're selling with Shopify, the global commerce platform supercharging your selling. You have no problem selling online, in person, on social media, and beyond. Gary, easy on the cha-ching.
Oh, sorry, but my Shopify sales are through the roof.
Start selling with Shopify today and discover how millions of businesses around the world use Shopify to ignite their selling. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.